I accidentally discovered this new AI coding workflow that will blow your mind. Yes, I tried Claude Code on Google Antigravity, and the results were something that you should see. But is it even practical to use Google Antigravity along with Claude Code? Yes, it's possible. It all started after testing Google Antigravity for nearly a week, and if you've been following me and my content, you know I'm a big fan of Claude Code and I use it daily in my workflow. So I thought, why not use Claude Code inside Google Antigravity and make them collaborate on one project? I thought about the strength of each. Google Antigravity running Gemini Pro would be ideal for working in the backend, while Claude Code running Claude Sonnet maybe 4.5 would be amazing for the frontend build. Then why not try them together in one project? That was the initial idea. To test this, it would help me learn, is it possible to ditch VS Code for Google Antigravity, since I use VS Code along with Claude Code in most of my workflow. As it turned out, this worked so well beyond my initial skepticism, since Google Antigravity had started giving me bad experience after testing it for 1 week. Watch this video until the end to see what happened, and just in case you've not seen me before, I am Joe. I test and review AI model and AI coding tools on daily basis and publish my findings here and on Medium. My current goal here on YouTube is to get to 10K subscribers, and you can help me in that journey. Hit that subscribe button to help us keep going. Now let's get back to using Claude Code on Google Antigravity so that you can see what is possible in this new workflow. This is Google Antigravity editor layout. You can open the terminal from this menu, new terminal. It opens up this terminal at the bottom. Let me create space here. I'll create a folder for this project. I use make directory Antigravity Claude Code combo, a combination of Claude Code and Google Antigravity. Then we open this folder. To use it, our project folder. Let's open the agent manager, and there is this new notice here of improved quarters. Let's dismiss that. I want to create a new workspace for this project. This is where you create your workspace. You click on open workspace, then I'll open the folder I created. I've selected the folder that I created, trust folder and continue. And now our workspace is set up. Let's return to the editor layout and we have our workspace here. I'll click on it. It opens up this layout, and on the far right we have the agent panel. On this agent panel you see we have our workspace selected. Then we have this modes, planning and fast mode. Here is where you select the models. At the center is where you're going to see your code or your coding area. At the bottom of this model selection we have these higher rate limits notice, and once I click on learn more, it opens up these Google AI plans. I'm currently on Google AI Pro. Now let's open the terminal from this menu, or you can use that shortcut. Let me close the agent panel so that I can launch Claude Code. I'm inside that folder. You can see that path. Open Claude Code by typing Claude, and it loads up with this warning, which is the default. Do you want to work in this folder? Then I have the option yes and no. I click yes to continue, and Claude Code loads inside Google Antigravity. I'll be minimizing this, then I'll open Google Antigravity so that they can work side by side. But first, let me test with the status command. Claude Code seems to be running very well. I can see the version. I can see the session ID. The model is Claude Sonnet 4.5. It's IDE installed VS Code extension, and all these other details about Claude Code. And you can see the close similarity between Google Antigravity and VS Code. Let me review the prompt that we'll be using to build our test project. We are building a book recommendation app, and we've divided the roles into two, where Google Antigravity will work on the backend prompt and Claude Code will work on the frontend. For Google Antigravity backend prompt, we are building a Node.js Express API that uses Gemini to recommend books. So we'll create one endpoint, post API recommendations, then the input will be preferences, then user reading taste. then it's going to output some JSON data. We will use the Gemini API to generate 3 book recommendations based on the user preferences and return JSON. We're going to enable cross-origin and we're going to run on port 3000. For Claude Code, we'll create a simple book recommendation page using HTML, vanilla, JavaScript, and CSS. One HTML file that will have text input for user preferences, the button get recommendation, then the display area for the 3 books with the title, author, and the reason. When the button is clicked, it needs to create a post request to our backend API, send our preferences and the value from the input, and we get back the data to display it. That's a basic book recommendation app that uses Gemini AI to help us get book recommendations. As I mentioned earlier, the objective of this project is to see how Google Antigravity can work on the same project with Claude Code, each assigned different roles. I begin by setting up the model. On Claude Code, I use /model, and the default model is Claude Sonnet 4.5, that is the default and selected. Then I move on to Google Antigravity and I select Gemini model as the model of choice. And I have 2 versions, High and Pro, so I go with Gemini 3 Pro High version. Now I'm going to place the prompt for each. I start with Google Antigravity. I put in the prompt in the prompt input box and I want them to work within one folder, one to have the backend folder and the other to have the frontend folder. I then place the prompt inside Claude Code prompt input. Then now create a folder that they should work on. On this side panel, I create a folder AI Software Engineer Book App. Let me now update the prompts. I begin with selecting the mode for Google Antigravity. I go with the planning mode. Then I want to update the prompt. Use the directory named AI Software Engineer inside this workspace and create a folder named backend for this project. That's my additional instruction for Google Antigravity. The additional instructions for Claude is use the directory named AI Software Engineer Book App inside this workspace and create a folder named frontend. Each of these tools will create its own folder and work within that folder. I've started the process and I've sent the prompt in both of them at the same time. Claude Code begins by creating the folder inside the main project folder, while Google Antigravity goes into thinking mode and creating the task list. It comes up with this implementation plan and we can implement that and the task list that it's going to follow. This is the task list for Google Antigravity. Let's close both of them and now return to the terminal. For Claude Code, it now wants to run make directory folder to create the front end folder and have the option to proceed or tell Claude something different. So I click on yes. And once I open the sidebar, it's going to create the front end folder and you see it has created that front end folder. Back to Antigravity, I want us to implement this plan. I open the task list, book recommendation API task, and this is what we're going to follow as Antigravity builds this up. I'll just prompt it, implement the plan. And it begins generating the code and will follow through using this task list. Back to Claude Code terminal, it has already created the code for the front end. It's now ready to create this file. Let me close that panel so that you can view this code. The front end code seems like it's ready and I have the option to create the index file at the bottom. Accept the file and it creates this index file and within minutes it gives me this message. Done, I've created a book recommendation page at the front end index.html. You can test it, open in the browser, and it gives me some features and some technical details. Let's open that file to view the code. Back to Antigravity, I open the agent panel. It has created the backend folder. I accept again, I click on accept so that it installs all the dependencies. It begins creating the files and checking my checklist. You can see my checklist, the project setup is complete. Now we are creating the index.js file. I keep clicking on accept to create the files. We have the package.json file for our backend. It has installed the Node.js modules and we are now creating different kinds of files. And up to this point, we have the backend implementation done. You can see the task list has all those check marks. And within a few minutes, we've completed since all the checklists have been done, and we are now ready to begin testing this project. To begin the testing, I want us to start with the front end, where we are going to ask Claude Code to run live server that help us to see the front end preview. The code looks okay, both from the front end, the back end. All the folders have the code that we require for this app to be functional. This is the index.html file, and it looks okay. Let's now prompt Claude Code. Can you run the live server to test the front end? For Google Antigravity, to prompt it to test the backend, we can use a prompt like, can you run the backend server to test it? Back to Claude Code, it's ready to run the command live server, so I just accept that, while Antigravity begins analyzing the backend files before it runs the server. Claude Code first runs into this first error, which looks like a port issue, and it quickly corrects it and prompts me again, and it runs and opens up live server preview. We can now see the app and the server is running. For Google Antigravity, it's still analyzing the files, and we can see sending the request to the backend is failing. We can see a number of errors that are coming up, and this is not necessarily that the code is wrong. We have not updated our API key since this app is using Gemini API to get the book recommendations. After a few attempts, it finally gives me the message, I have successfully run the backend server, but the test request failed because Gemini API key in the backend.env file is set to your API key. The backend is not running because we do not have an actual API key. The next step is to create a real API key, update it in .env file so that the backend can run, and we test it along with the front end to see if we are able to send the backend request and everything works as we expect it. To create your API key, you need to go to Google AI's studio/API keys. Then you click on create a new API key. Give your key a name like Google Antigravity plus Claude Code combo. Then you need to have a project set up on your Google Cloud Console, which you're going to select as the next option. If it's not set up, you create a project, then click on create key to have your API key. You will use this API key inside your .env file to connect your app to Google Gemini API. For this key to work, it's also necessary for you to activate your account on your billing section. You click on that link, then link up the account with your billing. Back to Google Antigravity, update the .env file with the real API key. Then you can prompt again, I have updated my Gemini API key. Can you test again? Google Antigravity begins testing the backend by verifying the key, then accept to run this command. It runs into different kinds of errors based on the available models for you to use. You can see it's switching between different Gemini models to see which is available based on your billing details. And after a few attempts, it comes up with this list of the progress updates that it has done, like restarting the backend server with the updated API key, switching the model to Gemini Pro, restarting the server with Gemini Pro, diagnosing model availability, debugging API key format, testing direct API connectivity, updating model to Gemini 2.0 Flash, restarting the server with Gemini 2.0 Flash. Finally, it gives you that message. The backend is up and running, and the test of post request was successful. It means it's been able to connect to the API and get back a positive response. We now have our backend and our front end running. We get the message that the backend is running on localhost port 3000. We are now ready to test the real app to see if it's working. Back to the terminal where Claude Code is running, we can see everything is running. It's time for us to now test the app. I get back to the app preview and I simply type AI engineering. It seems like the recommendation is failing. The post request to the backend is failing. And here is a trick that I use to correct. Claude Code is very good at taking screenshots. Like in this case, we have a failed function, My approach is to take this screenshot and place it on Claude Code and tell it to fix that specific error. I save that screenshot, then I drag it to Claude Code. I can give a message like fetch fails in that function. Is it a backend or a front-end problem? Claude Code begins analyzing it and it gives me this elaborate analysis of that error and it shows me exactly what's happening with that. We can also test if Google Antigravity can help with this by highlighting the terminal message back to Google Antigravity chat. And you see it's analyzing very well, identifying the problem. Google Antigravity can as well help, but I prefer to debug using Claude Code since it's very precise and very reliable. I go ahead and ask Claude Code to fix this and update, but on the Gemini side, I stop any updates since I don't want a conflict of both of them working on the same issue, trying to correct it at the same time. Claude Code immediately updates the file and gives me a very clear message on where exactly the problem was, and after a few iterations, it fixes the problem and gives me the message, perfect, I've fixed the issue and restarted the backend server. Claude Code has taken over and even restarted the backend server. So we have the front-end server and the backend server running from Claude Code. At the bottom, you can see two background tasks message that indicates we are running both the front-end and the backend server on Claude Code. I get back to the front end to test and I simply type AI engineering again, then click on get recommendation. And I get 3 books that are recommended: building machine learning powered application, then designing machine learning systems and machine learning engineering. This app is now functional and we've been able to build it using Google Antigravity and Claude Code, each working in its own folder and in different roles. This is a perfect workflow if you are curious enough on how you can use the two together working in one project. And if you'd like to learn more about how to use Antigravity and get your skills to the next level, check out this other video that is on the screen. If you enjoyed this video, do not forget to give it a like and subscribe. One like, one subscribe gives me one more step forward to bringing you great content. Thank you and I appreciate it.